Criminal justice reform, the other side. Coming up this week, it's Mitchell Talks, the News9 Sessions with Aaron Brilbeck. Great to have you with us here on Mitchell Talks, the News9 Sessions. Aaron Brilbeck, Ron Gentzler from Oklahoma Policy Institute. Good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, because somebody saw DA Hermanson this week. Hi, Jennifer, we're looking right at you on this one. And wanted equal time, which we think is great. It's so great to have you. Talk about what the DA Hermanson had to say, and welcome to the program.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Hermanson made some assertions. You guys ran the numbers. You're saying that a lot of what he said isn't necessarily on board. Talk to us a bit about that.
Right. So what the opponents of State Question 780 retroactive are saying is that a lot of people who are in prison for simple drug possession are there because they were convicted for simple drug possession, but they were originally charged with something much more serious, a violent crime. So what we did is we looked at all those people, about 1,300 who were in prison for simple drug possession only in July 2018, and we looked at their court records, what they were originally charged with. We didn't find a single person who pled down from a violent charge who's in there now. We found 1,200 of the 1,300 were there, never had any charges more serious than simple drug possession. Some of them were charged and convicted of things like assault and battery, have served those sentences, and are only in prison now for simple drug possession. So this claim that there are a bunch of dangerous people who could get out under this law is simply not true.
The discussion is passing legislation. It's got bipartisan support right now. Passing legislation that would make State Question 780, which the voters approved, retroactive. And State Question 780, essentially what it does is it reduces the penalties for nonviolent crimes. So your nonviolent drug crimes, your nonviolent crimes involving property, some of the more minor stuff. But your findings are that, contrary to the argument that that a lot of these were just pled down from more serious crimes, you're saying they weren't pled down from more serious, more violent crimes.
Exactly. Yeah. In the vast majority of cases, the people who are in prison for simple drug possession are serving just for simple drug possession, and were charged with nothing more serious than that.
So is this a scare tactic then? Are we trying to be scared into not backing this?
I mean, it is. It's a pretty well-worn, tough-on-crime tactic to say the people who are in prison are scary because they're in prison. Well, you know, it's kind of circular, because they're in prison because the courts told them that they had to be in prison. That doesn't make them scary. It just means that there was a decision at some point that they needed to be in prison. What we've decided as a state, as State Question 780 showed, with strong support, is that we're ready for a new approach to these low-level drug and property crimes. The polling now shows that those provisions are even more popular today than they were when they passed very easily back in 2016.
Is that right?
Yeah, the ACLU did some polling. 80% of Oklahomans are now in favor of 780 retroactivity, House Bill 1269.
I guess I'd say, and the cynic in me is saying, here's the problem that we're facing though. We're not properly putting the right amount of money toward treatment for mental health disorders and for addiction disorders. So as we're releasing these people, because right now, let's face it, we're warehousing them. They're not being treated in prisons because there's not enough money to treat them in the prisons. So we're warehousing a bunch of people, and the goal is we're going to put them back out on the streets again, and they're just going to find themselves right back in prison, the cynic says.
Right. Well, if a person's only offense is simple drug possession, that really means they just have an addiction problem. And what we saw with the commutation campaign, the Oklahomans for Criminal Justice Reform did an enormous amount of work to get a couple dozen people out of prison through the commutation process last fall. It was an enormous amount of work, but what we saw was that the community stepped up. A lot of these, the people who got out are going back. They are finding services, And communities in Oklahoma are ready to pitch in and help and make this work. In addition to that, Governor Stitt proposed $10 million in this year's budget to go to the Community Safety Investment Fund, which was created under State Question 780's companion measure, State Question 781. So there should be more money this year. Our budget is finally recovering, so we have the money to invest in these things. And Governor Stitt has repeatedly expressed his support for criminal justice reform, and he understands that we have to make investments in those services in order to make it work.
Another thing you found, and I'm sorry, I'm monopolizing the whole conversation.
No, guys, again, if I can just get another cup of coffee here, it's Mitchell watches. That's okay.
Yeah, basically. Another thing that's found, which I found kind of disturbing, is what we're seeing is now a lot more people are being charged with possession with intent to distribute.
Right.
Is that because there are more people that are drug dealers, or is that because we want to lock more people up?
Right. So in Oklahoma law, and it's not like this everywhere, there's no quantity distinction between simple possession and possession with intent to distribute. In a lot of states, you have to have a couple ounces or more of marijuana, for instance, to be charged with possession with intent to distribute. It's not like that in Oklahoma. Possession with intent to distribute, which remains a felony, is based on circumstantial evidence. Mm-hmm. So other circumstances during the arrest. So prosecutors, when an arrest comes across their desk, has a lot of discretion on whether to charge that offense as simple possession, which is now a misdemeanor, or possession with intent to distribute, which is still a felony and still eligible for a prison sentence. What we saw is that in the first year after State Question 780 went into effect, there was about a 20% rise in possession with intent to distribute charges across the state. How do we? I think it's pretty difficult to say there's more drug dealers. There's really no evidence for that. There's not more arrests for drug-related crimes. So really, all the evidence points to a differing calculation on behalf of the prosecutors on how to charge those cases.
But what it sounds like you're saying then is that the prosecutors are going against the will of the people and intensifying the charges against these folks to make sure that they serve some type of time.
I think there's some evidence of that, but it's important to realize that that increase in possession with intent is really very, very minor compared to the massive drop in overall felonies. So we had about a 29% drop in 1 year in the number of felony cases filed across the state. And we're talking about a few hundred possession with intent to distribute cases more. So while I think there is a little bit of this, it's good not to overblow those concerns too much.
Gotcha.
I think you've tendered the witness.
I think so.
I saw it on TV last night. Some trial.
I'm a witness tenderizer.
One of the things that the DA talked about, and I've seen some of these stories read last couple of years, had the DOC director in here, this number which is astounding, that there are 4,500 people, Ryan, in penitentiary, in DOC custody, that waive or that could be up for parole, but they choose not to do so. Mm-hmm. Now, let's just take just theory here. If these 45 people went out now, if they were paroled, they would have some of these programs over them, some supervision, right? So these people, as the way I understand this, they're waiving their right to parole. When they get parole, there's nothing over them, no parole, no programs. So these are 4,500 people roughly that would be out on the street. What we've heard from you is you've got to have these support programs. So it sounds to me like by getting to do this, this is a ticking time bomb. These people actually are going to be without supervision, without the programs. Now they're on the street. Sounds like recidivism university. I haven't heard much about this. Is this something that, say, criminal justice reform folks should be championing to take this away, this waiver, so that you can get, first of all, that'd be 4,500 people less in the penitentiaries, which is, I know it's a drop in the bucket, but it seems to me that this is something we're not seeing very much about, and it ought to be something that should be high on everybody's list, is to try to the these 4,500 people do away with this waiver?
So the legislature passed House Bill 2286 last year, and it basically completely redoes Oklahoma's parole system. So there are some valid concerns about our parole process, but really the legislature, the Pardon and Parole Board, just this week had their first administrative parole docket, which is a form of automatically paroling people if they have nonviolent charges, if they comply with their case plan in prison. And this is really great policy because it gets people out automatically, so we don't have to go through the long process of the parole board voting, and it does require the Department of Corrections to supervise and provide support for the people who are getting out. This is a really huge deal. I don't think it gets enough. It's gotten a whole lot of attention. Adam Luck, who's one of the new Pardon and Parole Board members, has been tweeting about the cases that he sees, and it's really really amazing to see the stories that that those people have. There was one man, I think he was in prison for $400 worth of bogus checks. He's been in prison for 33 years because he had prior convictions. So to say that there's 4,600 people coming out that are dangerous is simply not true. Oklahoma incarcerates an enormous amount of people for really low-level things that isn't the case in other places. If we had, besides that, the 4,600 people that are potentially eligible for parole, they would be getting out in the next few years, no matter what.
But they'd be unsupervised if they just serve out their time.
Not
It seems to be contrary to what you're wanting, which is to have people that are having the support programs as they get out of prison.
Not necessarily. There are a lot of people who go to prison under split sentences, which is the judge will say so 5 years in, 5 years out, 5 years in prison. And then 5 years on supervision afterwards. So there's a lot of different there's lots and lots of different variables, lots of different ways people are sentenced, and especially those people who have violent crimes or kind of public safety related crimes, those people are much more likely to have those periods of supervision sentenced before they even get into prison.
It would seem, though, to me that the easy fix would be to make it mandatory. Anybody who's in for any type of a drug conviction, you get 2 years of supervision afterwards, or 3 years, or name the number. Why aren't we doing that?
I don't think that supervision is. It can be very good when you do it right. It can be a great trap door back into prison if you don't do it right. So a lot of people in Oklahoma are sentenced to prison due to technical violations, which is missing a meeting with your probation officer, not applying to a job, not getting a job, which are don't really say anything about whether a person is dangerous. We don't want to expand our criminal justice system any more than it already is. It's already the most expansive, intrusive criminal justice system in the world. And other states, are focusing on reducing their community supervision populations. We just haven't gotten there because we're still trying to bring down our prison population.
I've got one more question there's been a spate of publicity recently about women in prison on enabling child abuse, neglect, domestic violence. What do you think the numbers are for women my understanding is number one in the country in incarceration women. How many women are in prison for child abuse, neglect, enabling that shouldn't be there?
It's really difficult to put a number on that. We know that child abuse is one of the biggest reasons for women in prison. But I think it's less related to, I think what we should be thinking about is the conditions that we put our families in Oklahoma, with all the poverty we have, with all the stress that we have. We have some of the highest rates of adverse childhood experiences in the country. And people who are abused as kids grow up to have those same patterns when they're parents. So if we want to work on changing that, incarceration is not the answer. Maybe taking kids out of those homes for a bit, getting the parents help, that can be a much more effective way to reduce this problem in the long term. Creating more trauma by separating, imprisoning more mothers is just not going to work. And we've seen that. We've had the highest rate of female incarceration in the world for about 30 years. And these numbers aren't changing. And this, again, goes back to the point that Oklahoma simply locks up more people for longer periods of time for lower level charges than anywhere else in the world. I don't think it's because Oklahomans are worse than the rest of the country or the rest of the world. I think it's because our criminal justice system is making very punitive choices, and people don't have the supports they need. And we have to break this cycle somehow, and that's what we're doing this year with criminal justice reform.
Well, two things. Thanks for being here, and thanks for watching this program.
Of course.
They watch, right? It's great to have you here, Ryan.
Thank you so much
for being here.
Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for watching Mitchell Talks, the News9 Sessions with Aaron Brilbeck. See this again at news9.com/shows. Counts. Follow me, Scott Mitchell, on Twitter @MitchellTalks. See ya.